I'll never forget the way she said it. "Starting today, you'll be reporting to me." Her voice was light, casual, almost playful, but her smirk carried the weight of a declaration of war. Her name was Candace, 26 years old, 18 years younger than me, with a resume that was still thin enough to fit on a single page. She had been hired just last week, yet somehow, overnight, she was announced as the new head of my department. I'd been with the company for nearly 2 decades. My title, Senior Operations Manager, didn't even begin to describe what I really did. I was the one who kept things running when budgets fell apart, when projects derailed, when clients threatened to leave. I had patched this company's leaks so many times that I sometimes joked I should be paid as a plumber instead of an executive. But that morning, standing in the glass-walled conference room with the rest of my team, I wasn't laughing. Candace stood in front of us like a queen before her court. She had that shiny kind of confidence you only see in people who haven't lived long enough to fail yet. Fresh haircut, designer suit, manicured nails that tapped impatiently on the desk as the CEO sang her praises. "Candace will be bringing fresh perspectives, bold strategies," he said, his hand resting proudly on her shoulder. "She's the kind of leader we need for the future. Allie, you'll be working closely with her during the transition. That word sliced through me like a knife. Transition meant being replaced. Transition meant I was the past. I forced a smile, even as my team's eyes darted toward me, curious, worried. "Of course," I said calmly. "I'm happy to help." Inside, though, I could feel my stomach twisting. Candace didn't waste a second. "Allie, let's get your workspace sorted. I'll take your office. You can move into the smaller one down the hall." She spoke like it was already settled, not even waiting for my response. The room fell silent. My office. The office I'd earned after years of late nights, weekends sacrificed, holidays missed. The office where I'd celebrated wins, cried after losses, and built a career brick by brick. I nodded slowly. Understood. My voice was steady, though my hands weren't. By lunchtime, I watched maintenance staff carry out the desk my colleagues had gifted me after we hit record-breaking numbers 3 years ago. My plaques, my framed client letters of appreciation, all dumped into cardboard boxes. Candace trailed behind them, pointing, directing, her heels clicking across the floor like a metronome of arrogance. "The bulky desk goes too," she instructed. "It's ancient." Ancient. That word stung more than I wanted to admit. When I sat down at my new space, an uneven desk shoved near the supply closet, with a chair that squeaked every time I moved, I caught sight of myself in the computer monitor. For the first time, I looked replaceable. My phone buzzed. A message from HR. "Please confirm receipt of the attached performance review draft." Confused, I opened it. My stomach dropped. It was a formal performance improvement plan, the kind of document they put in place before termination. Resistance to new leadership, lack of adaptability, reluctance to embrace innovation. I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. After 18 years, they were building a case against me. And then, as if on cue, my phone rang again. "Howie here," my colleague's voice stammered. Allie, Candace has called a team meeting in the Willow Room. Just for department leads, I paused. "When?" "Now. She said it's not necessary for you to attend." Excluded. From my own team. "No problem," I lied. After hanging up, I noticed another email. This one from Candace, sent to the entire department. Attached was a glossy presentation on growth strategy innovation. I clicked it open, and my heart pounded. The slides were mine. Word for word, number for number, the expansion plans I had drafted 6 months earlier. Market entry strategies for Spain, Portugal, and Greece. Client projections I had spent weeks refining. Proposals the CEO had once called too ambitious. Now, dressed up in Candace's logo-heavy template, they were suddenly visionary. My hands trembled as I scrolled through each slide. This wasn't coincidence. This was theft. By late afternoon, I was summoned to Candace's new office, my former office. She leaned casually against my old desk, scrolling through her phone. "Sit," she said without looking up. I stayed standing. Finally, she raised her eyes. "Your European strategy was well received today." "You mean my European strategy?" I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. She smiled without blinking. "Your research was useful groundwork, certainly, but groundwork isn't architecture. I've elevated it into something actionable." "You copied my work?" I said, word for word. "That's a serious accusation," she replied smoothly, slipping her phone into her pocket. "Especially from someone in your position." "My position?" She leaned forward, her smile widening. "People who stay too long in one place often grow territorial, resistant to change. The CEO understands this transition might be difficult for you. If you can't adapt, Allie, then maybe this company isn't the right place for you anymore." The words landed like a slap. I left her office without responding, my mind racing. They thought they'd cornered me. They thought I would break down, beg, or walk away quietly. But as I sat at my cramped desk, one thought crystallized in my mind. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and they were about to find out. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. Candace's smirk, the CEO's blind faith in her vision, the look on my colleagues' faces as they avoided eye contact. I had given this company 18 years of my life. I had sacrificed dinners with my husband, school plays, family vacations, all for a job that now seemed determined to erase me. And yet, despite the humiliation, I wasn't angry. Not in the way they expected. I felt clear. They thought my power came from a title, a desk, or an office with a view. But my real power was something they couldn't strip away so easily. Memory, documentation, 2 decades of watching, listening, and saving every important scrap of paper, every email, every contract. I kept an external hard drive at home, locked in a filing cabinet. A habit I'd built after nearly losing critical records during a server crash 10 years ago. That habit was about to become my weapon. The next morning, instead of crying in the bathroom or drafting a resignation letter, I went straight to that cabinet. I pulled out the drive and plugged it into my laptop. There they were. Thousands of files, meeting notes, contracts, presentations, financial reports, email backups, a complete shadow archive of the company's history. I spent hours scrolling, connecting dots, cross-referencing proposals with approval records. And then, there it was, buried in an old project folder. 6 months ago, I had submitted the European expansion strategy that Candace had claimed as her own. The original file still carried the timestamp of submission to the CEO's inbox. Even better, the follow-up emails where he rejected it. His words were clear. Too ambitious, not realistic. Now, the exact same numbers were suddenly revolutionary under Candace's name. It wasn't just about stolen ideas. This was evidence of something bigger. The CEO's selective blindness, the manipulation of leadership, the rewriting of history. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. Not until I had something undeniable. By week 2, Candace had tightened her grip on the department. She began hosting closed-door meetings with my team, and whenever I passed by, their laughter stopped abruptly. She walked through the office with the confidence of someone untouchable. One afternoon, I overheard her in the break room. Her voice carried just enough for me to catch the words. "Allie's a nice person, but she's stuck in old ways. The board sees me as the future. Honestly, it's only a matter of time before she phases out completely." I didn't confront her. I just noted it. Words can disappear in the air, but actions leave traces, and I knew where to look. The next day, HR called me in. A formal meeting. My stomach tightened as I sat across from a woman I'd known for years. "Allie, we've received concerns about your adjustment to new leadership. We'd like you to sign this acknowledgement of your performance improvement plan." She slid a document across the table. I skimmed it. Cold language jumped off the page. Resistant, outdated, not collaborative. I smiled faintly. Of course. May I take this home to review before signing? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, but please return it by Monday. I left with the document tucked neatly in my bag. It was exactly what I needed. Proof they were laying the groundwork to push me out. That evening, I worked late at my kitchen table. I built a file, carefully layering evidence. The rejected proposal with its original timestamp. Candace's plagiarized slides. Copies of emails showing my authorship of client strategies. The PIP, ready to show how they were framing me. And then something else caught my eye. A financial report buried in a shared folder from last quarter. Candace hadn't even been hired yet, but her name appeared in the consultant review notes. She had advised the CEO before the merger was finalized. I sat back, stunned. Candace hadn't just appeared out of nowhere. She had been planted long before she walked through the doors on her first day. By midnight, the file was complete. Clean, undeniable, chronological. A single document that told the story from beginning to end. The next morning, I walked into the office calm and collected. Candace was already there, rearranging my former office to her liking, barking instructions to maintenance about replacing the blinds. She didn't even look up when I entered. Allie, make sure the Winterman account files are transferred to me by end of day. Oliver prefers working with me now. I placed a folder on her desk. Of course, I said softly. Her eyes flicked down. She opened it absent-mindedly, then froze. Her smirk vanished. Color drained from her face. This is, she stammered, flipping through the pages, each one carefully tabbed and highlighted. She shoved the chair back so hard it scraped the floor. You can't. Without another word, she stormed out of the office, the folder clutched in her hands. I watched her heels strike the floor in sharp, furious beats as she marched straight toward the CEO's office. I leaned back against the doorway, my heart steady. The first shot had been fired. And this was only the beginning. I didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, voices carried down the hallway from the CEO's office. At first muffled, then sharp. Candace's voice, high-pitched and frantic. Gerald, the CEO, trying to calm her down. I stayed at my desk, deliberately calm, clicking through emails as though nothing unusual was happening. By the time the door opened, the whole floor had gone silent. Candace stormed past, her face red, folder clutched tightly against her chest. She didn't even look at me. Gerald followed more slowly, his expression unreadable. Allie, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Could you step into my office for a moment? I stood, smoothed my jacket, and followed him inside. The door shut with a soft click. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Gerald sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, his eyes searching mine. On the coffee table lay the folder I had placed on Candace's desk, now half open, papers spilling out. Where did you get this? He asked finally. I compiled it, I replied. From my own work files, emails, project archives, every document in there belongs to the company. I've simply kept records. His jaw tightened. You're accusing a new department head of plagiarism. That's a serious claim, Allie. I leaned forward slightly. It isn't a claim. The timestamps, the emails, they speak for themselves. He exhaled slowly, flipping through the pages again. You understand how this looks? Internal conflict. One leader undermining another. The board doesn't want politics, not after the merger. I held his gaze. This isn't politics. This is the truth. And if we ignore it, the consequences will be far greater than office gossip. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, we'll review it. In the meantime, I expect you to remain professional. No more. Surprises, I nodded once. Of course. But when I stepped out of his office, every pair of eyes in the corridor shifted toward me. People who hadn't spoken to me in weeks suddenly looked nervous. Darlene, who used to share lunches with me, offered a weak smile. Howie quickly turned back to his screen, pretending to be busy. Candace didn't return for the rest of the day. That evening, just as I was about to leave, a notification popped up on my screen. Meeting invite. Executive conference room. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., mandatory. No subject line, no agenda. Just one word in the sender field. Gerald. I knew then that this wasn't over. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Neutral colors, professional but understated. No sign of weakness, no sign of arrogance either. When I arrived, the entire executive team was already seated around the long, polished table. HR was there. Legal counsel, too. And at the far end, Candace. She avoided looking at me, her posture stiff, hands clasped tightly on the table. Gerald cleared his throat. We're here to address certain concerns that have been raised regarding departmental leadership. All eyes shifted to me. Candace was the first to speak. This is retaliation. Allie has been resistant from day one. I've done nothing but try to modernize our processes, and she's twisting things to protect her position. Her voice trembled slightly, but she masked it with indignation. I waited until she finished, then opened my laptop. With permission, I'd like to show a few documents. Gerald gave a curt nod. I projected the screen onto the wall. First, the original email I'd sent 6 months earlier. Proposal attached. The timestamp, the subject line, the CEO's reply. Too ambitious? Not realistic. Then I opened Candace's version. Submitted last week. Identical numbers, identical targets, identical phrasing. Only the formatting had changed. Murmurs rippled around the table. HR leaned forward. This appears troubling. Candace snapped. Coincidence. Market analysis often produces similar results. I clicked to the next slide. Coincidence doesn't explain why the formatting errors in my draft, the extra space before Portugal, the misaligned bullet under Greece, appear exactly the same in her presentation. The room went silent. Gerald rubbed his temples. Candace, how do you explain this? Her jaw clenched. Allie is manipulating the narrative. She's been compiling records for years, obsessively. Who knows what else she's twisted? I closed my laptop calmly. Everything I've presented can be verified. Every file came from company servers. Nothing altered. Legal counsel scribbled notes, frowning. HR whispered something to Gerald. Finally, Gerald raised a hand. Enough. We'll conduct a full review. Both of you will remain in your positions until further notice. But I expect cooperation. No further escalation. Candace's chair screeched as she pushed back. This is ridiculous, she snapped, storming out of the room. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. I remained seated, hands folded neatly, my expression calm. When the meeting adjourned, Gerald caught my arm. His voice low, urgent. Allie, be careful. You've stirred something bigger than you realize. I met his eyes. I know. And I did. Because in my bag, alongside my laptop, I carried another folder. One I hadn't shown them yet. The one that proved Candace hadn't just stolen my work. She had ties to the company long before she was ever hired. And when the time was right, I'd show them. The review dragged on for days. HR sent me polite but pointed emails asking for clarifications on my documentation. Legal requested copies of my backups, which I carefully provided. Each time I walked into the office, I felt the air shift. Colleagues whispered when I passed. Some offered quick smiles, others avoided me completely. Candace, meanwhile, doubled down. She began holding impromptu team huddles without me. Every time I walked into the break room, her voice lowered just enough for the conversation to die. At one point, I caught her slipping into Gerald's office with a thick folder under her arm, her expression triumphant. By Thursday afternoon, I received a calendar invite marked confidential. Executive conference room. Friday, 8 a.m. Mandatory. I knew what was coming. They weren't going to simply review my evidence anymore. They were going to put me on trial. Friday morning, I arrived early. The building was quiet, the kind of stillness before a storm. Inside the conference room, the full weight of leadership sat waiting. Gerald at the head, HR on one side, legal counsel on the other, and 2 board members who rarely attended internal meetings. Candace sat opposite me, her expression carefully neutral, though her fingers drummed nervously against the table. "Allie," Gerald began, his voice heavy, "we've reviewed your claims. But Candace has provided counter-evidence. Emails, performance reviews, and statements from several colleagues suggesting you've been resistant to change and territorial," I interrupted softly. "Outdated? Difficult to work with?" Gerald hesitated. "Yes." I smiled faintly. I expected as much. From her folder, Candace pulled a stack of printed emails. "Here. Proof. Team members saying Allie dismissed their ideas, ignored collaboration, slowed progress." She spread the pages like playing cards across the table. I reached into my bag and laid down my own folder. Full versions of those same emails. You'll see the edits she made when you compare legal counsel picked one up, frowning as he scanned it. Side by side, the differences were clear. Sentences cut mid-thought, context stripped away. A joke about slowing progress with too many coffee breaks transformed into a criticism of my management. Murmurs rippled across the table. Candace's cheeks flushed. "She's twisting this." I stayed calm. "No, I simply kept the records. That's the difference between us, Candace. You manipulate stories. I preserve them for a moment." The room tilted in my favor. Gerald rubbed his temples, clearly torn. That was when I placed one more sheet on the table. Not dramatic, not flashy. Just a printed contract note from 6 months ago. "This," I said evenly, "is a consultant agreement. Notice the signature at the bottom." The board members leaned forward. The name was unmistakable. Candace Palmer. "She was advising this company before she was hired," I continued. "Paid as a consultant during the merger. That's why she walked in on her first day with strategies already in hand. That's why she knew exactly which projects to target. She wasn't a fresh voice. She was groomed for this." The silence was heavy. Gerald's face paled. HR's pen froze mid-scribble. Finally, one of the board members spoke. "Gerald, did you authorize this?" His throat bobbed. I was told it was a short-term arrangement to assist with market analysis. Without disclosure to the board?" Candace slammed her hands on the table. "This is outrageous. Allie is fabricating connections because she's jealous. Look at her. She's desperate to hold on to power she no longer deserves." But her voice cracked at the edges. I leaned forward, my tone steady. "This isn't about jealousy. It's about integrity. 18 years I've given to this company. Do you think I'd risk everything on a lie? Or do you think maybe the real lie walked in the door wearing a designer suit and calling it leadership?" Candace shot to her feet. "You don't get to talk to me like that." "Sit down," one of the board members said sharply. The room fell quiet again, the air heavy with tension. Gerald finally spoke, his voice weary. "We'll need to investigate this further. Effective immediately, both of you will be placed on administrative leave until the review is complete." Candace gasped. "What? You can't—" But the decision was final. HR slid papers across the table outlining the terms. Full pay, suspension of duties, no access to company systems. Candace snatched hers, face burning, and stormed out without another word. I gathered my papers slowly, calmly. "Anything else?" Gerald shook his head. "That will be all." As I walked out, I caught sight of my team gathered by the coffee station. They looked at me with wide eyes, whispers already spreading. But I didn't stop to explain. I had been silenced, yes, but not defeated. Because I knew something they didn't. Administrative leave had just given me exactly what I needed. Time. And I wasn't going to waste it. 2 weeks on administrative leave felt like 2 years. The first few days, I woke up at my usual 6 a.m., only to sit in silence with a cup of coffee, wondering who I was without the constant pull of emails, meetings, and deadlines. But then something shifted. The silence stopped feeling empty. It started feeling freeing. For the first time in years, I had space to think, to observe, to connect dots I hadn't seen before. I spent my mornings combing through files, not out of desperation, but out of habit, and the patterns became impossible to ignore. Candace's consultant work wasn't just casual advice. She had been in communication with one of our major competitors during the merger. Her name appeared in meeting notes, hidden in footers of documents no one had bothered to check. Payments routed through a market analysis firm that, with a little digging, traced straight back to that competitor. It wasn't just plagiarism anymore. It was infiltration. By the end of the second week, I had built a file so detailed even the most skeptical lawyer would have trouble dismissing it. Emails, payment records, consultant agreements, shell company registrations. A chain of evidence that connected Candace not just to our company, but to the very people who stood to gain if we failed. And still, no word from Gerald or the board. Delays. Silence. The oldest corporate trick in the book? Stall until the storm passes. But I wasn't about to let them bury this. On the Monday of the third week, I put on my best suit and drove to the office. My badge still worked. The receptionist gave me a startled look, but I walked past her without hesitation. The board was meeting that morning. I knew because I'd seen the schedule circulated before my suspension. I walked straight to the executive floor, carrying one slim manila folder. Outside the boardroom, Gerald nearly choked when he saw me. "Allie, you can't be here. You're still on leave." "I know," I said calmly. "I just have one document to submit before you make your decision." The room fell quiet as I entered. 12 board members, HR, legal counsel. Candace wasn't there, though I had no doubt she was waiting somewhere, preparing her next move. I placed the folder on the table. "Before you finalize anything, you should see this." They hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a simple one-page summary. Not the whole mountain of evidence, just the sharpest peaks. Dates, payments, shell companies, Candace's name linked directly to the competitor who had quietly acquired stakes in our firm. The room shifted as they read. Eyes widened. One man muttered a curse under his breath. A woman at the far end rubbed her forehead like she was fighting a headache. Finally, one of the senior members looked up. "Is this verified?" "Every detail," I replied. "And every source is public record. Anyone with patience and a memory could have pieced it together. I just happened to notice what others ignored." The silence stretched until Gerald cleared his throat. His face was pale. "We'll need immediate legal review." "If this is true." "It is true," I interrupted softly. "And you know it. You've seen the signs for months. You just chose to believe in a shiny new leader instead of the people who built this company brick by brick." No one spoke. I gathered my bag and straightened my jacket. "You don't need to decide my future here," I continued. "I already have. I'm resigning, effective immediately." Gasps around the table. Gerald leaned forward. "Allie, wait. We need you." I shook my head. "No, you need someone you respect." And that was never me. You applauded when my work was stolen. You put me on a performance plan after 18 years of loyalty, and you ignored every warning until it threatened your bottom line. I won't fight for a seat at a table where I was never valued. I walked out before they could respond. That afternoon, as news spread of Candace's suspension pending investigation, my phone rang nonstop. Messages from former colleagues, clients, even competitors. Word had gotten out. About the file, about the infiltration, about me. One message stood out. Oliver from Winterman Group. "If you're leaving that circus, we'd like to talk. We could use someone with your eye for detail." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset. The company I had given 18 years to was crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. Candace would face consequences, maybe even legal ones. Gerald would scramble to reassure shareholders. And me? I was free. Revenge wasn't about seeing her fired or exposing the board's blindness. My revenge was something simpler, sharper. It was walking away on my own terms, with my reputation intact, my integrity proven, and my value recognized by people who actually mattered. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's refusing to be erased, and rising so far above those who underestimated you, they become irrelevant to your story.